Thank you. And just recognizing we have a very, very tight timeline, so I'm not going to say much. I would just encourage all of you to be thinking about questions, maybe put them in the chat. And I'm going to hand it right off to our first presenter, Jennifer Bumble.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Bumble. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Kansas and an assistant research professor at the Kansas University Center on Developmental Disabilities. Just for a visual description, I am a white woman wearing a gray shirt with long brown hair in front of a couple of bookshelves filled with lots of knicky-knackies and a green wall. So first slide. Perfect. So I'm presenting on a project called Mapping My Health. Mapping My Health is a project focused on enhancing the social and physical health of young women with and without autism. And you can see that we have a large research team here at Kansas. And of course, I am the PI. I also have Amanda, my autistic co-researcher on the project who couldn't join today. Also Shada Rayleigh, who is part of the research team, Jessie Kiblin, Clara, and Serena as well. So we have a large team that has acted not only as researchers, but coaches and data collectors, and also supported the design of the curriculum as well, because this is a new curriculum and a new intervention for us here in Kansas. Next slide. So as I said, Mapping My Health is an intervention for young women with and without autism. It is an inclusive intervention, bringing them both together in one community-based intervention. And it's really looking at the impact of bringing together two components. So the first is digital resource mapping through a process called MAPS, or Mapping Assets for Post-School Success, which I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide. And also an evidence-based practice, the self-determined learning model of instruction. And so the real purpose is to increase the size of what we call their health network. So all the people who can support their social, physical, and emotional health. And then we also, of course, want to increase those general health and well-being that we measure through the PROMIS scale. So this is also a participatory action research project. So throughout the intervention, which I'll talk a little bit more about, folks are thinking about things that they've learned and lessons that they might want to share with the community afterwards. Next slide. So as I said, mapping assets or Mapping My Health is based on two different components of the intervention. The first is mapping assets for post-school success. So there's an image here of a digital resource map. And this is a way for people to start thinking about the things that already exist in their community to support their health. So the participants all created this digital resource map using Google My Maps. They all created a map unique to their goals for the program. And then using that map, they started to identify who are the people, the providers, and the programs that exist in my community who can support my health goal, whether that goal is related to physical, emotional, or social health. Then using the self-determined learning model of instruction, which is a flexible curriculum where folks are setting a goal, creating a plan to achieve that goal, measuring their progress, and reflecting on that goal throughout the time frame. People use that self-determined learning model of instruction to then evaluate their map and set a goal. So maybe there's people they need to add to their health network. Maybe there's places that they might want to go more frequently or activities they might want to do more frequently. But they're using that map to set specific, measurable, and observable goals to expand their health and expand what we call their health network. Next slide. So this is a participant-led exploration. So we have a workbook, a Mapping My Health workbook, where people move through lessons. There are examples, and after each lesson, we are going through and completing worksheets to kind of apply the lessons learned. We're also talking through these different concepts and problem solving and brainstorming as a group. And there are 5 principles that guide the Mapping My Health project. The first is that everyone is an expert on their own feelings, ideas, and experiences. We also believe that everyone has strengths. We are all different. Everyone is on a health journey. So the goal isn't always to meet that health goal that they set. it's much more important the lessons that they learn along the way. And then also that we can all do hard things. And we know that improving our health or expanding our support network is difficult and challenging. And just the fact that we're embarking on this journey together really indicates that, you know, we can do these hard things and really empowers young women to move forward with their health goals. Next slide. So the way this project is designed, this is a pre-test, post-test. It is an underpowered group design with 26 young women. So we have 12 in our Mapping My Health group. We also have a control or business as usual group that has 14 participants in it. And over the summer, so over the last 12 weeks, folks have met 9 times in person, ranging from 2 to 4 hours per session. It's been great. We actually haven't lost any participants, which has been fabulous with a summertime in-person intervention. And we just closed out the project last Saturday. So still collecting some of those initial findings. As I said, as part of this intervention, folks share back what they've learned with folks that are not only in the business as usual group, but other individuals from the community. And so I can share that at our last session, when we met last Saturday, they actually created a gallery wall of images that represented their health journey that they shared with friends and family members. And there's also a community advisory board. And so that is picking up right now as the intervention is closing. So the purpose of this advisory board, which includes siblings, self-advocates, of course, my co-researcher, educators, and parents, is really to focus in on how we can continue to refine the intervention based on participant reflections, and also what's next for dissemination and other groups that might benefit from this intervention. Next slide. So I came up with some questions for feedback, but I'm sure folks might have additional questions. But what I have here is what dissemination strategies folks think might be most effective based on their experiences to reach a wide range of stakeholders, who might be included in a future advisory board that might be beneficial. I know sometimes these are more effective than others. And then what other groups you think might benefit from an intervention like this that's really focused in on thinking about mapping resources in the community and setting structured health goals.
Thank you, Dr. Bumble. I'm gonna step in real quick just to make sure we keep enough time for all the other presenters. So I'm going to ask that we hold on the questions until the very end, and if we have time, we can address those. So right now, I'm going to shift gears here, and Jonathan Drummond is going to be our next presenter. So if we get his slides up, I'm just recognizing that it is right now 3:21, so we're going to get cut off here very shortly. So nice work, Dr. Bumble, and I appreciate the presentation. And Jonathan, you are muted, so.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. So I've got this a little bit scripted here because of the tight timelines that we're on. Anyway, welcome to Exploring the Therapeutic Value of Martial Arts for Neurodevelopmental Disabilities, which I'll refer to as NDs from here on. I'm John Drummond. I'm a 56-year-old white male with salt and pepper hair. I'm wearing glasses, and I'm in a blue shirt with the University of Kentucky insignia on my left chest. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the things I want to hit here is the bottom line up front on this presentation, because we are crunched for time. And that bottom line up front is essentially that executive function, or what I'll refer to as EF from this point forward, appears to mediate the relationship between physical activity and cognitive, emotional, and behavioral improvement in those with NDs. EF deficits in those with NDs are very similar to areas of EF improvement that we see in exercise studies. And we suspect that the physical activity of optimal value for those with NDs or autism spectrum disorder via executive function is activity that features sequential patterns and ordered movements. Where this differs from the state of the research right now is that most of the studies that have started latching onto this really kind of look at aerobic exercise in some of the studies. And we think that there are some things that get at executive function a bit better and will be more productive. Next slide, please. So the current effort is derived from supporting work with the Adaptive Martial Arts Association, a national organization in the United States, and the Kentucky Inclusive Health Collaborative to develop national guidance. That guidance will be published very soon now. That was done with some of the co-authors you saw on the first slide. And per the literature review, martial arts does appear to be helpful for those with disabilities in ways that are both rehabilitative and also promote adaptive outcomes, which is our primary interest for this presentation. Next slide, please. Beyond martial arts alone, there is a mountain of evidence that physical activity improves a number of mental aspects, including anxiety, depression, mood elevation, and expressions or stabilization of cognition, affect, and behavior. Most of this appears to work via stimulation of central dopaminergic, serotonergic, and noradrenergic pathways. Next slide, please. So let's look at aspects of psychological function that have been empirically observed to improve via martial arts participation and beyond just aspects of physical fitness. And I don't want to discard those improvements in physical fitness, but I do want to say here that physical fitness is also a consideration beyond the focus of this presentation and is a vital outcome for those in the autism spectrum disorder population, given accelerated rates of obesity, associated health decrements, and shortened lifespan that we see in the autism community. Improvements via martial arts activity have been reported in the domains of anxiety, depression, mood disturbances, more adaptive social and behavioral skills, self-control, impulsivity, and hyperactivity. Next slide, please. And communication, communication skills, focus and concentration, self-esteem, academic performance, and attention. Next slide, please. A quick overview here is warranted for those of you that may, I jumped ahead a little bit here. It turns out that many of the improvements observed via participation in martial arts align with aspects or expressions of executive function and the documentation of those by professionals such as child psychologists. Next slide, please. I think I'm one slide ahead of myself. Next slide, please. Okay, there we go. A quick overview here is warranted for those of you that may not be familiar with executive function. Executive function is that psychological capacity that matures through childhood and allows us to pursue goals in a logical, step-by-step fashion, engage in sequenced behaviors or chains of interrelated behaviors towards a desired and focused end state, cognitively adapt and continue focused behavior when things change, engage in the inhibition of desires or distractions that get in the way, and effectively employ environmental feedback for effective working memory moment to moment as we work through our day. Now, it turns out that disabilities displaying EF deficits include, next slide, many of the same things I previously noted that have been documented as being improved by participation in martial arts. So this gets interesting, doesn't it? Next slide, please. Some other disabilities are listed here that display executive function deficits. Next slide, please. So in the past year, one of the interesting things, there's a publication by Ludiga and colleagues, and they drew attention to this interesting confluence of findings in physical activities, its benefits, and the remarkable correspondence between the advantages accrued from physical activity and the deficits noted in those with neurodevelopmental disabilities and related disabilities. And the title of that article, if anybody's interested in pursuing it, I can provide that along with a much broader reference list, was How Children with Neurodevelopmental Disorders Can Benefit from the Neurocognitive Effects of Exercise. So on the left of this chart that you see in front of you on the slide, you'll see the benefits of executive function related to exercise or physical activity in healthy youth. On the right, you'll note the congruence with deficits seen, especially in young males, in those with various neurodevelopmental disabilities and related disabilities. Ludiga and his colleagues concluded there is likely a huge research hole to be filled in here, which is what you see there in that gap entitled potential. A hole for which findings might be used to greatly benefit those with neurodevelopmental disabilities and other related disabilities. Next slide. Oh, no slide.
It's the 1 minute mark, Jonathan. So if you could begin wrapping up, please.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and hit the next slide. Because I don't see the slide yet on the screen. So there you go. Okay, just a real quick comment here. There's a guy named Derek Chesson who's worked with the folks at Johns Hopkins who's done some great work here. Next slide. So what we're finding out now on our team is that similar phenomena and stories are emerging from those working with youth with NDs and other disabilities in the worlds of adaptive dance and climbing. What we're hearing has led us to believe that the virtual instruction largely fails those with ASD and other neurodevelopmental disabilities, that we must go live as a preferential way of doing this, that due patience and gradual advancement timelines are warranted, that many with NDs will have a one-on-one instruction to start, but will then segue into a social environment that they work with, that there's a progression of creating a behavior that involves repetition, producing mastery, and then extending that behavior sequentially into the next activity or action. In other words, these are chain sequence behaviors. Next slide, please.
Jonathan, we're going to have to unfortunately stop right now to make sure we get our last presentation and before we all get cut off. So thank you for your time. I'm now going to shift gears, and I'm sorry I have to do this, everybody.
That's fine.
Shift gears to Dr. Rasheda Raley.
Hi, everyone. I will try to keep this quick because I know we're on a short timeline. I'm Shada Raley. I am an Iranian woman with dark brown hair, a white shirt, and unlike Dr. Bumble, I just have one bookshelf behind me, so less exciting in the background. This ARP Scholars Project is called the Self-Advocacy and Goal Attainment Project, the Saga project. It's focused on implementing a self-determination intervention in community-based settings with autistic youth and adolescents. Next slide. This is a quick presentation of our Saga project team. So that's me as the ARP scholar, my co-researcher, Ben Edwards, who is a researcher at our center, Dr. Bumble, who you saw in the first presentation, and Ryan Henley, who is a research aide on our project. As I mentioned, this project is really exploring the impact of a self-determination intervention. If you could go to the next slide, please, called the Self-Determined Learning Model of Instruction. And we are really looking at the impact of this intervention on self-determination, executive processes, physical and mental health outcomes, and post-school outcomes. I'll just continue going while the slides are worked on. So next slide, please. The SDLMI is a three-phase instructional model, which really supports everyone to be self-determined. And in this project, autistic youth and adolescents really work through the three phases of first setting a goal that is important and meaningful in their lives, which could relate to physical, mental health, employment, post-secondary education. Then create a plan to achieve that goal, and then adjust that goal or plan based on what they've learned. Next slide. In the Saga project, we recruited 10 autistic youth and young adults between the ages of 16 to 22 to engage in the SDLMI, and then also a group of 10 youth and young adults in a business as usual group to really identify the impact of using the SDLMI versus the traditional transition specific supports that they receive in school or in other contexts. We planned for in-person implementation, but the preference from our participants was for virtual engagement because this was really during a challenging time during the pandemic. So these were 90-minute virtual sessions that we engaged in, and our goals focused on the buckets that you see on the screen. So executive processes, self-management, self-regulation, physical and mental health, so exercising, strategies to really reduce anxiety, post-secondary education, exploring jobs and activities on campus and social activities, and also employment, so really identifying the career that they really liked. In addition to a wonderful co-researcher who has lived experience with autism, we also had an autistic advisory board who met monthly and really supported us on materials, identifying how to adjust challenges, and supporting refinement. This next slide is the best slide, which is a screenshot of our Saga project participants. So you'll see that this is sort of what a 90-minute session looked like. A lot of fun, a lot of engaging activities, and weekly meetings. So it was a really great way to keep in touch with everyone. Next slide, please. Just to get an idea of some of the goals that our participants set. I mentioned a few of them when we looked at those, so I won't go through all of these, but some of them, if we're really looking at executive processes, trying 3 strategies for creating new self-management habits. Related to physical health, some of those were working out on cardio equipment for 30 minutes, 1 time per week. And also related to more mental health and self-regulation, meditating by researching strategies of how to meditate, or Googling, asking someone who knows how to meditate. So just to give you an idea of some of the participant goals. Next slide. I won't talk about it too much, but we used a variety of engagement strategies while we were virtual. Videos, we used Padlet for engagement, Google Docs, icebreaker, small group instruction. We made our own Wordles because that was really exciting at the time and new. Next slide. And so these are some of the things that we talked about, just to kind of pull out some examples. So we talked about what are some of the differences between long-term and short-term goals. And when you first ask a 16 and sometimes up to 22-year-old, what goal do you want to work on, in the next several weeks, they'll say like buying a house. And that might be feasible for some, but maybe not for most 16-year-olds. So then it's really talking through then what's a short-term goal that you can work on towards that longer-term goal, and talking through then how to create a plan to achieve that goal that aligns with their preferences, their strengths, and their cultural values. The next slide, I have the questions for this session, but I really appreciate the opportunity to share about the Saga project and hearing the other ARP Scholar presentation. So thank you for this opportunity.
It is 3:35 on the dot. Which concludes this session. So let me just first, before we all jump off, why don't I just, I'd like to thank all of the presenters for not just the presentation, but also the adapting to the time crunch. So great job. It's not easy. As for next steps, how do we get out of here since we had to take the link? It sounds like we may need a link. Dana, what is your advice?
So we do have our 5-minute break now, and I know that's a long meeting, so please feel free to hop off to take your break. If you would like to stay and ask questions to our presenters or even just chat with them, feel free to. But otherwise, you'll be using the link that you originally used to join the first meeting. So it's in your email. You should be able to just search up Zoom or Research Day, and it should pop up there.
Excellent. If for those still here, are there any questions for the presenters? I don't think all the presenters are on. I take that back. All are on right now. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah. Quinn.
Hi, my name is Quinn. I use he, him pronouns. I'm from the University of Minnesota. Nice to see you. I'm sort of interested in hearing more about the community-based participatory research process. I can't remember who presented the project with that element, but I'm really interested in engaging in that kind of work, and I just want to hear about that kind of process for you.
Yeah, so my project did have a participatory component. It didn't end up being as large as I would have liked, only because you plan for all these things to happen, and then you get in the room and you only have a couple of hours. So there's a lot of time constraints. But the biggest component that I wanted to capture was that they would identify, what they've learned along the way or what they want to share back with other folks. So in my mind, when I was planning it, the idea was that we would be creating like a guide or a handout or some sort of product to share with folks in the community, whether there might be medical providers or community agencies or organizations. And then I really let participants kind of drive that. Initially, I thought, there would be one kind of product that we would share back related to physical, emotional, and social goals, but they just wanted to create something all together. And they landed on a gallery wall of photographs that represented their health journeys, which actually turned into like a really rich experience. They developed artist statements and really enjoyed that photography process. And we explored that as a way to support emotional health as well. So I kind of let them steer that process, gave them some frameworks for things that we might share, and then ultimately they decided on the format and how they wanted to share back. But it was a really great experience, especially bringing back participants from the business as usual group. So even though they didn't get to participate in the intervention, they were able to learn about some of the things that happened during the project.
Thank you so much. It sounds like that piece that they were disseminating was really accessible for people who were actually going to be using the end product. And I just think that's really valuable. So thanks for reiterating that process. And it definitely gives me more to think about as I sort of enter my career as a researcher. So I'm a second year doc student, so I have some time, but I definitely like hearing about other people's experiences. Thank you.
Yeah. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. I might be able to point you to some other publications as well, or tell you more about our process. I'm happy to share any materials with you too.